It's my pleasure now to introduce Chris Fox. He's the Chief Sustainability Officer for HanesBrands. He's been with Hanes for more than 2 decades and currently oversees the company's worldwide sustainability strategy, programs, and long-term goals, which are focused on people, planet, and product. Prior to being appointed Chief Sustainability Officer, Chris was the Vice President of Global Corporate Social Responsibility for 15 years, and his areas of focus included ethics, factory compliance, product safety, environmental sustainability, and philanthropy programs. Without further ado, Chris Fox. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So I have one of the last sessions, maybe next to last session. So my job is to keep you awake in a dark room, right? But hey, great to be back in Chapel Hill. You see, I'm sporting the colors. It's going to be a heck of a day on Saturday, right? I hadn't realized, in all honesty, that that this is the first time Duke and Carolina have ever met in the tournament, which seems to me just hard to believe. My son told me that earlier in the week. Really hard to believe, but so my oldest son, as I was telling a number of the students here just a few minutes ago, graduated in 19 from Chapel Hill, had a fantastic experience here, loved it, road crew. That was another fantastic experience. I'm a Wake Forest guy by grad school, but my children, my money went to Chapel Hill, so I'm rooting hard. Hey, would like to first say thank you so much for having us here, giving us the invite. We've kicked off a new, much closer relationship, us HanesBrands in particular, our champion group, with Carolina, and supporting its environmental efforts, and especially a new sustainability fund. And we're really, really thrilled to be able to do that. And as I was saying to folks as we're getting started here and waiting to get started, you know, we really do as a company, I personally, my team, who's here with me as well, that's part of our sustainability group. This is kind of the kickoff talk that we've got here on campus, and we want to develop that relationship. We have a student that was an intern with us last summer, Kara, that's coming back as a full-time employee. So we want to recruit students. We want to be engaged. We want to talk. We want to develop. We want to, you know, really help drive this whole space on campus. So really appreciate the invite today, and really appreciate the opportunity and the opportunities I think that exist going forward between us and Carolina. So what I'd like to do today, and I'll say this again as we're waiting to get started. I'm a lawyer by trade, and this is actually a talk I gave as part of a CLE to a whole bunch of lawyers last fall. But I thought it was a really good topic, and maybe not exactly on point to clean tech, but I'm going to weave it in and weave in how clean tech and renewables for us has played such a big role in our progress to date in our sustainability goals, and also how we're thinking forward. And I'll talk you through the process that we went through over the last couple of years in resetting sustainability goals for 2030, how we did that, how we thought through that, and how clean tech plays a big role in that. So to kick off, let's talk about HanesBrands a little bit. One of the biggest companies, apparel companies on the planet, 59,000 employees globally, a little over, and in fact, it's down after a divestiture of one of our businesses in Europe, but in 30 plus countries around the world. So we're literally on every continent. But what makes us particularly unique, and again, this will be a theme that we weave through as we talk through the next 15 or 20 minutes as well. What makes us really unique in this space, there are only a couple of other apparel companies on the planet that do this. We actually own the vast majority of our own manufacturing capacity. So about 70%, about 70% of our total unit volume comes out of factories that we actually own. And that goes back to the fabric mill. And again, that whole notion I'll weave through this talk as well. So fabric production, sewing production, the movement back here to the States, that is typically offshore, largely in Latin America. But the fact that we own so much of our own capacity has been a big driver behind how we thought about sustainability for many, many years. our values, you can see our mission at top, and we've got a brand new leadership team, really a new CEO that's only been here about a year and a half. So our overall purpose, defined, redefined, although it was very, very close to some of the language that we actually used as part of our sustainability group for years, making the world more comfortable for everybody. Everybody, 2 words, very purposely. And obviously there's a lot baked into that mission statement. And on the bottom here are 4 core values. The 2 on the bottom, I think most relevant to this space: doing what's right. Again, kind of a very broad statement, but very relevant, I think, to this space. Creating opportunities for all, especially in the people space. And I'll talk about the 3 pillars of sustainability that we have: people, planet, and product. And the fact that we've got 50,000 manufacturing employees around the world makes that opportunity for all value that much more relevant to us, I think, than many other apparel companies. Okay. Our sustainability ambition. So again, on the backdrop of us being this big global apparel company, sell heavily into mass retailers, the Hanes brand, right? In Walmart, in Target, on Amazon, the Champion brand, our intimates brands, Bally, Playtex, Wonder Bra. So a broad suite of brands, and we're manufacturing on huge scale. Millions of pounds of cotton, hundreds of millions of pounds of cotton that we're using every year. 50, 60, 70 million pounds of polyester. About 15, 16% of that being recycled now. A long way of saying we're not Patagonia, right? We're not, and there are lots and lots of niche brands that have built business models around sustainability. Bombas, for example. Patagonia was really the first in that space. But they are, at the end of the day, and they're doing great work. In fact, I know the folks from Patagonia and have worked with them for many, many years in various forums. Great folks doing a lot of great work. But we use more recycled polyester in a week than they will in 10 years. And so that's where this ambition, I think, really plays out. We want it to be sustainability for all. How do you take sustainability to the masses, literally, right? How do you take it into a Walmart? How do you take that $2 to $3 t-shirt and make that a sustainability offering? How do you bring that consumer into the journey with you? So our goal really is to, unlike Patagonia, take sustainability to everybody every day and make it accessible and relevant to all. We've done lots and lots, and I know you've probably seen it, lots and lots of market research data over the years, where especially the younger generation is more and more and more interested in this space, environmental and social. And so bringing them along for the ride, and I'll show you a way that you as a consumer can really come along for this ride as well. But our goal is to, at the end of the day, make sustainability relevant and available for everybody. So 2007, we were still part of Sara Lee Corporation at that point. We were spun off from them. We were made our own publicly traded company, turned into HanesBrands, Inc., Winston-Salem, North Carolina, right down the road. One of our prices of freedom from Sara Lee Corporation was $2.5 billion worth of debt. One of our key initiatives right out of the gate to not trip debt covenants and keep ourselves still alive was to focus heavily, Philip, right, on saving money and paying down that debt. And the notion, especially as a manufacturing company, where, and that's really our core history, we've been a manufacturing company for 100 years, with it really starting quite literally in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and many other parts of North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina. You know, essentially fill your car with gas and you could get to about every plant we have. So we get to 2007, we've got $2.5 billion worth of debt, and we also have these big textile mills. We've got one in Dominican Republic. We've got one at the time was a contractor. We bought them, brought them on. and them being the very big energy consumers. So starting really right with clean tech, how do we save a bunch of money? We stop burning fuel oil, right? And stop burning very expensive other energy sources. And we move those textile mills to biomass energy. And so, as you can see off of the 2007 baseline, and this is as of 2020, and we had a first set of goals actually really through 2012. We reset them, we got to 2020. But as of 2020, off a 2007 baseline, our total greenhouse gases, scopes 1 and 2, we dropped them 40%, largely around that renewable biomass portfolio. Energy down 26%, water 30%, both of those on an intensity basis. And what's most impactful really about these numbers, again, with the backdrop of $2.5 billion worth of debt, and the mentality that we went after our energy programs initially and our renewable energy programs to save money, was that 26% energy reduction number. At the time in 2007, we spent about $100 million a year in total energy cost globally across all of our operations. We cut that number by 26% over that 10-year period, but we ramped up to that actually really quite quickly. Long story short, 2007, and this is actually now going into 21, 22, but close enough. Figure about $250 million in total savings between 2007 and 2020 because we focused so much on clean tech and renewable energy. We paid down debt. We focused on it being a cost driver first and a big business driver. But look what ended up happening on our overall sustainability metrics and goals. And again, I'm going to tie that forward here in a few minutes around a similar mentality that we've got in philosophy and thinking around how we're going to attack packaging as we move forward towards our 2030 goals. So lots of progress between 2007 and 2020. As you can see there, renewable electricity, our total portfolio now 46%. That was 2020. That's actually bumped up a couple more points to 48% now in 2022. Recognized across a range of different organizations, an A grade, which is the top grade in CDP. We participated and worked with and submitted to CDP for, Philip, 10 years, about close to it. We got an A in 21. We actually dropped down just a little bit to an A minus in 22, but essentially so did everybody else. The bar was raised a little bit and nobody got an A, but for a couple of very small niche brands in Europe. Recognized, done a lot of good stuff, made a lot of progress, saved a whole bunch of money. But we get to 2020. We ran through our 2020 goals, and that's kind of where the progress that we had that we just walked through. But we stepped back. I actually came back from a conference. Another one of my colleagues was there as well, of the Corporate Eco Forum. And this is summer of 2019, so before COVID, where there was just a tremendous amount of discussion around long-term goals. What's that next set of goals? A lot of companies had about 2020 as an endpoint for their various sustainability goals. And I came back and I looked at who is now my boss at the time, was not. I historically reported up through the law department. I now report to the head of our supply chain. And I came back to, who's Mike Faircloth. I came back to Mike and said, Mike, we have got to step back now that we are getting to the point of these goals expiring and really give some considered thought into where do we want to be in 10 years? Where do we think the world's going to go? Where do we think the consumer is going to go? What's the consumer going to expect? What do our investors expect, which are increasingly demanding? What's the regulator going to expect? I think many of you have probably seen what came out, I guess, just early last week, about a week ago from the SEC, draft rulemaking around disclosure of carbon emissions. And so we saw it coming. And again, that conference really just lit a light bulb off in my own head. We could see all of these things coming. And I come back and say, Mike, we've really got to sit down and be very thoughtful about where we want to be for the next 5 to 10 years. So we worked with an environmental consulting firm that we had worked with and had gone through a couple of different derivations, but worked with a couple of folks with Anthesis, a consulting firm called Anthesis, which is actually fairly young, but now a very big environmental consulting firm that has just done terrific work for us for the better part of 15 years. And brought them back and said, listen, we need to do a number of things. One, we need to do a really good benchmarking exercise. What's the rest of this world up to right now? What are our peers up to? Not only peers in the apparel space, but peers in the CPG space and other industries. What's the world up to? As many of you may know, and you will know if you end up working for big companies, senior teams and boards of directors love benchmarking. What's everybody else doing? And how do you stack up against everybody else? So first come in and do a really good benchmarking exercise. Let us know where we are. Then help us devise that next set of goals. What you saw on the previous page were almost entirely environmental goals. And that was the space that we were really assigning specific goals to and for up to 2020. And spent the better part of 6 months going through that benchmarking exercise. And lo and behold, it turned out that we were, very much in line with what our peers were doing and what our peers were thinking. But we moved from there into what should that next set, that set of 2025 and 2030 goals look like? Where do we really want to be with a big range of stakeholder expectations coming down the pipe? And again, just amplified again by what the SEC did last week. And this is where we landed. We landed, as I mentioned, really a much broader definition for us of sustainability than just the environmental metric. It's about people. We've got 50,000 manufacturing level employees that we directly employ, that we directly manage. There are people, they're not somebody else's. There are communities that we're living in, that we're working in, that we're raising our kids in. So people, probably of any of the three, the most important. And we wanted to recognize that and pay the appropriate attention to it. So our goal, really improve 10 million lives by 2030. And workplace quality, again, the fact that we own it and operate it, a big focus on the working environment of our own people. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, increasingly important, as we all know, but a big focus in our programs around education, wellness, and our overall philanthropic efforts. So we want to really impact people. Planet, it's a re-up of what you saw in 2020, really with one big change. We made a commitment to set science-based targets. And so this is the fall of 2020 when we make that commitment, we sign that commitment. We spent all of last year, Philip in particular, back with the Anthesis team, doing the analytical work, which typically takes companies 2 years to get through. We banged it out in a year and got to holiday time right before Christmas this year and submitted what we believe will be our new science-based targets, which are a 50% reduction in scope 1 and 2 and a 30% reduction in scope 3 by 2030. So that's a big deal. And again, I've got a slide on here in a minute. It's a big deal not only to us, but again, that's clearly where the trend is going, is you need to be part of the Science-Based Targets Initiative. There are 1,500 companies that are a part of it. That's the expectation. We recognize that's the expectation, and we've really doubled down in that space. So science-based targets, continued reductions in energy, water use, renewables, zero waste to landfill. I'm going to talk about cold water wash in a minute, so I'm going to hold off on that and how that becomes relevant here. But then product, moving to 100% sustainable cotton, and for us, that heavily means US cotton. Recycled and or biodegradable polyester. We're working on some things right now around some biodegradable finishes that could potentially impact polyester and plastics and single-use plastics, reducing weight of plastics and getting out of single-use plastics. So that's what we came away with after about a 6-month time period. working with Anthesis, getting internal buy-in all the way up to the CEO, presented to the board, actually. I mean, these are, especially with the SEC draft rule now, these are very much board level issues now. And there's going to be much more and much closer board oversight, board involvement, and board direction on where this whole space goes over the next 10 years. But that's where we landed. After about 6 months, we then spent about another 6 months developing a new and we think much better, although we got a lot of good feedback, sustainability website, hbisustains.com. And literally working on, as we speak, we're going to go live in a couple of weeks with a big update on our 2021 progress against what we put up there in October of 2020. So that is where we landed. And some of these numbers, in fact, you get a sneak peek of them. We're not going fully live in public with them for another couple of weeks. But off of our new baseline, we're moving away from that 2007 baseline, and are now at 2019. Science-based targets has now really got that greenhouse gas measure, especially scope 1 and 2, now being an absolute measure, not an intensity measure. So great initial progress, even during the COVID years. So 11% energy down 7%. So again, off that original baseline of 07, that's another $7 million in savings. Water 8%, and water for us, the textile mill, that fabric mill, uses a lot of water. The less water you use, the less energy you're going to use as well, because much of that energy is used in heating that water. So water reduction also a big part of our overall story and our overall energy story. And as I said, we bumped that renewable electricity number up from 46 to 48%. So really pleased, honestly, with that first kind of kickoff year of 21 against those 2020 goals that we set back in October of 2020. Questions? Cool. Okay. So as I said, science-based targets, if you're looking at benchmarking, this is the ultimate benchmark in the space, right? You've got, as I mentioned, 1,500. I'm sure that number, the slide's now 6 months old. That number's probably closer to 2,000 by now. But you can see the core of our peers, all of us setting science-based targets. Levi's, Lululemon, PVH, Under Armour, our big retail partners like Target. So we clearly recognized when we went back and did that benchmarking work that this is a path that we needed to go down. And much of that 50% reduction, the end of the day, is going to be derived from our continued focus on renewables. So getting our renewable goal is 100% renewable energy. Getting to that 100% is what's really going to drive that 50% SPT overall reduction off that 2019 baseline. So this is a really important piece of the puzzle, and we were really proud to be able to work through it in about a year and get it submitted really, really quickly. Cold water wash. Opportunities for all, opportunities to engage everybody, make sustainability for all. This is, I think, the key driver over the next 10 years. I didn't know at the time, and this is going back 6-7 years, that if you look at the greenhouse gas emissions over the life cycle of a t-shirt or a bra or a sweatshirt or really any piece of apparel, and it'll vary a little bit by product type, but 50 to 60% of the total greenhouse gas emissions from the life cycle of an apparel product comes from heating hot water or heating water in the laundry room to wash in hot. And the reality is, and we spent a lot of time with P&G, a lot of time, in particular, they focused on their Tide brand, that there are formulations out there that will get your clothes as clean and cold as they will in hot. And so the easiest way for all of us in this room to make an impact on the apparel that we buy and wear and use, if we want to make the biggest impact at all across the life cycle in the greenhouse gas emissions, it's the ask is that simple. It's 2 words. It's wash cold. That's it. And so we partnered with Tide. So this is going back last spring. We actually started to do it in the COVID year, but pushed it back a year. And you may have seen the Mr. T ads on TV. They're going to go back again in and around Earth Day, tail end of next month. So a long way of saying a big long-term habit-changing campaign to convince the consumer in the US and ideally globally to wash in cold. That's how we're really going to make a difference in this space. And it really is that simple. We committed back in 20 to get 300 million impressions in front of people by 2022. We actually, because we blew this out with Tide the way that we did, we actually got to 800 million impressions just in 2021. And we're working right now on extending that relationship with Tide and also potentially bringing in one of our major retail partners to be kind of the third leg of the stool. But at the end of the day, our goal is over this next 8 to 10 years, getting to 2030. If we could convince America and or the world to switch to one more load in cold than they're doing right now, it would have a tremendous impact. So wash cold. This is sustainability for all. And so you're going to see more coming down the pipe publicly as we continue our relationship with P&G and Tide. So as we discussed in that goal slide, and going all the way back to the beginning of the talk, of the big focus on this space for us in particular as a manufacturing company, again, kind of unique to the rest of the apparel world, where we get the ROI on investment and on a CapEx dollar. And driving our sustainability efforts in some categories, energy being one, and I think packaging being the other, where we focus the organization on how can we save money. And if we can get, and this is not as easy as I would hope it to be, and we're continuing to plug away at it, right? But our team is really focused on driving packaging reduction and packaging change and packaging innovation around how can we use less, use less, save money. Last year, we spent just for our US product, $177 million on packaging. $177 million on stuff. Some of it gets recycled right now, but let's face it, the vast majority of it probably ends up in a landfill. $177 million on stuff that people throw away. And if that doesn't strike you as ridiculous, it certainly strikes me as ridiculous. A ridiculous waste of money, a ridiculous waste of resources, and a ridiculous impact on our environment. Long way of saying there's just a tremendous amount of opportunity there. So we're going to attack that the same way we attacked energy, which is to focus the organization first and foremost on how it can save money. And if we can lop 10% off that $177 million, we are going to hit that 25% weight goal. Last year, we saved about $3 million. We reduced weight by about 5%. That translated into about 3.5 million pounds. That's largely corrugate. That's where all the weight is in packaging. But that $3 million and Asla, who's in charge, who's here in the front row and in charge of this effort for us, and I were chatting just the other day, and my I don't want to say order, but maybe it was order, right? It is we need to go find more money, right? Go find more money. Because the other challenge that we've got, and I'll tell you that in all candor, one of the biggest challenges that we've got in all these sustainability goals is really on the materials side. It's sustainable, it's more sustainable cotton, i.e. for us, that means typically more US cotton. Recycled poly and even the biodegradable finishes cost money. There is more demand for recycled poly out there right now than there is supply. And it's Econ 101, it's driving the cost up. And so one of the biggest challenges that we've got, and I know it's not unique to us, is there are going to be aspects of our sustainability work that save significant amounts of money. We just talked about them. Energy. I think packaging has got the potential to save us $10 million plus a year if we put our heads to it. And I say, if we can't figure out how to save 10% off of $177 million, they should fire us all. All right. And so that's a lot of money. But what we're really working on and thinking about, and again, I know we're not unique as an organization, is how do we capture these cost savings in one aspect of your sustainability program and apply those to other parts of it that will likely cost you some money. And a lot of that cost over the next 5 to 8 to 10 years is going to be on the material side. We haven't figured that out yet. In all candor, I don't know that anybody has. But as we've gone out with this much more holistic view of sustainability, that people, planet, product philosophy and set of goals, as we've broadened the definition of it, I think we've broadened, at least potentially, the financial impact of this. And so we've got to figure out how holistically we look at not only the substance of what we're trying to do, but quite frankly, in the public company environment, what the financial impact is going to look like as well. We still have shareholders we've got to take care of, right? Not just regulators and not just consumers. We are still a public company. And so that's going to be one of our bigger challenges to face in the coming years, is how do we manage aspects of our sustainability program that may well cost more money? And nobody, especially in a very cost-driven space that we play in, think T-shirts in Walmart, right? It is a relatively low margin business. Adding cost to the product is a challenge. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we are facing. We'll figure it out. I'm confident we're going to figure it out. But the end message there is there are lots of ways to save money in the sustainability space. Drive your goals, drive energy reductions, drive greenhouse gas reductions. But there are also aspects of it as you continue to broaden the definition of it that could cost you some money. And we got to figure out how to balance all those things out. Okay. Great. Questions? Any questions at all? So hopefully that just gives you a little bit, please. Yeah. 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 We've got an R&D department looking at that stuff all the time, and it goes back. I remember going back 10 plus years when they were looking at hemp. Hemp, kelp, there are all sorts of neat technologies out there. You know, the challenge for us, again, as especially the Hanes brand, typically a mass brand, low cost, low price, relatively low margin, is figuring out how to do it at scale and figuring out how to do it cost effectively. So kelp may start out with Patagonia for a number of years, where they can put it into a t-shirt that they could sell for $75. But it might not be financially viable for us if we're trying to sell one for $5. But we're looking at that stuff all the time. And yeah, there's going to be things out there 10 years from now that we can't even imagine as we're sitting here today, for sure. And that's some of our job is to keep a really close eye on that and see what we could bring into that kind of sustainability for all mentality and mantra. Okay. Please. Yeah. 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 It did. For us, the way we're looking at it is that partnership with Tide ended up getting us some incremental space at one of our major retailers. So we got tens of millions of dollars in extra sales out of that campaign that we otherwise would not have gotten. And in fact, as we were talking about it, we were in front of our senior team talking about this about 2 weeks ago. And again, when you've got the CFO at that same table looking around saying, you know, what's the economic benefit to us of doing something like cold water wash, putting potentially media money behind it, are we getting a bump in sales? And so historically back in 21 and and what you're going to see land on the floor in 22 was incremental business to us. So that's certainly a nice thing to tell your CEO and CFO that yes, in fact, it did have a direct impact on our business. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think some of both, but we got that same placement from Walmart the next year, right? So that's certainly some indication that there was seen to be some benefit by your major retail partner, and but that is honestly one of our challenges as we continue to drive this campaign forward. What impact is it having? And if we're talking about it and quite frankly trying to sell it and convince the consumer to wash cold, that's one of the discussions that we're literally having right now is how do we measure that? How do we measure the impact of that? And so more to come there, but we have seen in the first couple of years of this campaign it having a direct impact on our sales to a couple of our major customers. Yeah. Trevor. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, as I mentioned before, we put that goal up when we launched the site in October of 2020. We are going to go live some point the week of April 18th with a report out on our progress against those goals. Each of the three pillars in people, planet, and product. The week of May 18th. So transparency is talking about that. What have we done? What programs do we have? How have we impacted our employees? How have we impacted the communities with our community development work? What have we done with product donations? We gave away 9 million plus, about 9.4 million units of apparel around the world to those in need, comforting those in need being one of our themes. So you're going to see us talk about that when we release that update here in a few weeks. So it's being transparent about it. It's talking about the stories, talking about what we're doing, and allowing the viewer, hopefully, of that website kind of into our world and in what we're doing and how we're progressing. So we want to be as transparent about it as we can be. You're welcome. Well, yes, ma'am. Yeah. 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 Yep. No, so no, good question. And so we are at the point where we're just starting to get it to scale and take it to market. We are going to start really consuming it this year. Still quite literally working, putting an old lawyer's hat on with what you can say and what you can't say in that space. It can get pretty touchy if you get out ahead of your skis. But long story short, we believe that there are some biodegradable finishes out there that you can both put on a plastic bag, for example, and into recycled poly that will enable that polyester or that plastic to biodegrade in landfill, biodegrade in water in the neighborhood of 5 years versus 200 plus if it's just left to its own devices. Essentially never going away, right? And so will that impact microplastics? I think the idea is, yes, it does. That finish is on the bag in the polyester so that it goes away, that there's nothing left of it. And that work continues to study that more, but that's the idea, that it reduces the plastic issue as well. Any other questions? Yeah. Yep. 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 Yep.
And I was also wondering if your company specifically
All the above. And again, you're going to see we talk about, it's a great question, obviously. That's great, guys. You want to impact 10 million lives. Well, what the heck does that mean, right? And so we're going to talk about that very transparently, back to your question, in that update in April. So you'll see that if you go to HBI Sustains when we relaunch that in April. So you're going to see a much broader discussion of that. But we're really breaking it down into three categories. One, and we talk a lot on the site about all that we do for our employees, especially at a manufacturing level. From education programs on our nickel, we've put over 3,000 largely sewing machine operator employees through education programs that allowed them to get their essentially a GED, a high school diploma. Big focus on education. We've got health clinics in every facility and really good health clinics in every facility around the world. Do a lot for the families, do a lot for the kids. Really do believe that we're paying wages that enable the worker and their families to live in households that can meet their basic needs. We talk about that on the website. So we believe that part of that $1.4 million is all that we do for our employees. So do we count every employee, and do we count their family members? So we take that 60,000 employees, 60,000 times 4, an average household size of 4. So about 250,000 is kind of one block. Everything that we do for our own associates and their families. The second is the community, a lot of community development work. And again, you'll see that in more detail on the site. So we're able to track the individuals within those programs that we are supporting, both with our financial dollar and to our employee volunteer time. We've got a big employee volunteer effort. So we're able to capture through our local HR teams, again, because we're on the ground in these communities, right, working and living. We're literally counting the number of people that are participating in those community programs. And third is product donations. 9.4 million units of product that we donated last year. And what we got comfortable, I mean, there's no playbook for this and how you define this, right? But we thought that a 10-to-1 ratio seemed to make sense. For every 10 pieces of product donated, that would equate to 1 life impacted. And so that turns out to be 940,000. So it's really those 3 buckets on how we're calculating, or how we calculated for 21 and how we anticipate calculating going forward. But we're going to talk about that very transparently again in a few weeks. You're welcome. Any other questions? I got a light shining in my eye, so it's hard to see. Yes, ma'am. It's a good question. So one, we're talking about wash cold. That's literally on package. That's on displays. You'll see it if you walk into a Walmart again in April. So we're talking about that. We've used that website heavily as our communication tool, but we have started, and I'm looking down at the front row with Asla as well. One of our big challenges is at our core, our mentality has been far more a manufacturing company than, and I don't want to say we're not a consumer-driven company. We always have been, right? We're selling a consumer product. But our thought process has been far more on getting the work done behind the scenes in our supply chain and not necessarily talking about it and flipping over the fence to talk to the consumer. Our biggest weakness for years has been how we communicate what we do in this space. We're a lot better at it now than we were 5 years ago. But I think that there's a lot more that we can do to talk about what I just talked about here today in the last 45 minutes or so to the consumer, because I do think the consumer has real interest. But in all candor, that's That's been one of our weaknesses, and one that we're actively working on with the front end of our business now. But hopefully you'll see us talking more to the consumer about what we are doing, because I think that especially that younger consumer is interested. Good. Can you give me the hook? All right. Well, thanks again so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.